Namaste and good evening. I'm Mahima Kapoor, researcher and assistant editor at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi. Welcome you all to the IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered for a talk under the State of Cities, #City Conversations, with Dr. Kanchan Gandhi on the state of the peri-urban. This deliberation is being organized by the IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies. I feel privileged to introduce the chair for the session, Dr. Rumi Ajaz. Sir is the Senior Fellow and Head, Urban Policy Research Initiative at Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. Welcome, sir. I'm honored to introduce the speaker, Dr. Kanchan Gandhi. Ma'am is currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IISER, Mohali, where she is looking at urban developments in the periphery of Chandigarh. She has taught courses in urban and regional planning at several departments of repute in universities across India for over a decade. She has experience working in the development sector, and her research and teaching interests include urban and regional studies, gender, disaster, and development studies. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We are fortunate to have Mr. Sameer Unhale, Dr. Bhavna Bali, and Dr. Ashima Sood as the discussants for the session. Mr. Sameer Unhale is the Joint Commissioner, Directorate of Municipal Administration, Government of Maharashtra. Welcome, sir. Dr. Bhavna Bali is the Assistant Professor, Department of Sustainable Engineering at Terry School of Advanced Studies, Delhi. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Kapoor.
Thank you. Dr. Ashima Sood is the Associate Professor and Co-Director, Center for Urbanism and Cultural Economics at Anand National University, Ahmedabad. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Now I invite Dr. Rumi Ajaz to take the proceedings further, and we look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahima. That was a very good introduction. I join you and Dr. Kumar in welcoming our distinguished panelists, speaker, Dr. Kanchan Gandhi, and the three discussants who are well versed with the subject, and they've been working on this topic for several years. May I give the introductory remarks?
Yes, sir. Please proceed with your remarks.
Okay. So the topic that has been chosen for today's discussion, state of the peri-urban, is, in my opinion, its importance is growing by the day. And when we think of our cities, Indian cities, when we see and experience the changes or developments that are occurring, there is a certain phenomenon that is observed, and that is that the cities of today, some cities, not all, especially some of the largest cities in the country, they are continuing to experience an in-migration of the population, whether in a gradual manner, or they are changing fast in terms of higher migration to these cities. And in some cases, what is happening is, and as we are all aware of, is that there is a demand for more land, demand for spaces where people can reside or perform an economic activity. And due to the in-migration that is occurring in cities, the land costs are increasing, and there is a scarcity of land in many cities, or the prices are so high that people are unable to afford the land costs or to set up an economic activity. And therefore, the most obvious and the most, so to say, available location is an area which is either within the city at the periphery or in the adjoining city limits, areas adjoining city limits. So here in these areas, there is scope for development, there is scope for residing and to start some activity. And this is what is happening in many of the largest cities, that there is the pressure, you could say, the pressure on these areas which are at the peripheries or the peri-urban areas seems to be growing gradually. This is observed in Delhi, this is observed in Mumbai, in Chennai, that a transformation seems to be occurring in these areas. And this has two dimensions. One is it is the benefits or the societal benefits that are being met. People are benefiting in various ways. And the second thing which is very striking and which is of concern to all those who are working in this sector, in the development sector, either at the policy making level within the government or among the research institutions, academic institutions, there is a growing concern about the negative consequences of urbanization in such areas. And hence, as I said, it becomes very important to understand what is happening in these areas. Number one, a whole lot of problems seem to be emerging. And I'm sure the speaker today would be covering some of these aspects. And the second thing, which is equally important, is about the kind of interventions that are needed to address the problems that those are occurring. So this is how I would put this topic in context, that peri-urban areas are areas of transformation, while some benefits are being derived, but the worrying part is the negative consequences of urbanization, whether it is related to haphazard development or the changing land use and occupational patterns, the reduction of open areas, green spaces, changes in farm activities. These are things which are of concern, and because of which a significant proportion of the native population or the population which has been residing in urban areas, the original inhabitants of the area are being affected adversely. So this topic has been selected from this point of view, that the distinguished speaker, Dr. Kanchan Gandhi, who is with the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, would enlighten us, would throw light on the research that she is engaged in, and we can take the discussion forward. So over to you, Dr. Kanchan Gandhi. I invite you to make your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And first of all, let me thank IMPRI for giving me this platform to present what is a part of my postdoctoral research work at IISER. So I've just recently finished my postdoctoral fellowship at IISER, and this is like the perfect opportunity to kind of present my work. So let me just start by sharing my screen. So the topic of today's presentation is splintered urbanism and the litigant citizen. And here I'm going to take you to into the periphery of Chandigarh mostly to understand what is happening in the periphery, what is happening in the peripheral settlements that are rapidly urbanizing. The villages are turning into census towns, which are then turning into statutory towns. And there's a new satellite city of Zirakpur that has developed over the last 20 years. And what is actually happening in Zirakpur is actually also what has happened in other parts of the country, whether be it Bangalore or Hyderabad or Kolkata or Delhi. Similar kind of processes are being seen in the peri-urban spaces of these larger cities. However, the periphery of Chandigarh was not that studied, and I found this like a perfect opportunity to fill in the gap in the literature by looking at what is actually happening in the periphery of Chandigarh. So first of all, to understand the periphery, I needed to understand what is the periphery and what kind of pressures of urbanizations and its impacts are there on the rural-urban interface. Peripheries are also geographies of opportunities. They are lucrative destinations for real estate actors because cities which have exceeded their capacities do not offer that kind of opportunity to the real estate. So therefore, peri-urban space becomes the most lucrative destination for these actors to really go in and invest. There are privatized modes of urban development, like we see in the case of Gurugram and Noida in the periphery of Delhi. And as I said, be it Bangalore, Hyderabad, Kolkata, similar kind of developments are being seen everywhere. So Zirakpur started to develop as a satellite city of the Chandigarh since late 1990s, but it only got a master plan as late as 2008. So actually the city started coming up before it had a master plan. So there was a bit of a chaos and haphazardness through which the city was built, which I will later show you from the images and the maps that I will show. So this is a map of the Tri-City area. So Chandigarh, along with Panchkula and Mohali, is now known as the Tri-City area. And the city cannot be seen alone, because now the flows between Mohali, Chandigarh and Panchkula are really like, it makes it a region. So so as you can see, on the towards the right is Panchkula, and towards the left edge is the Mohali, which has extended the same grid. The roads have been pulled in the same grid fashion as existed in Chandigarh. And so in my attempt to understand what was going on in the periphery, I kind of zoomed in into certain settlements. And towards the northeastern edge of Chandigarh is Indira Colony, which was basically as a transit camp for laborers who came in to build the city of Chandigarh. After the plan was formulated by Le Corbusier, there was a need for labor to come in. However, there was no housing provided for this labor. So this labor put up in this camp called Indira Colony on the northeastern edge of the city, near where you can see Mani Majra. And the colony still exists. They are being, the poor are at best tolerated in the City Beautiful. So Chandigarh, with its tagline of City Beautiful, cannot allow any informal settlements in the heart of the city. So Mani Majra being kind of a peripheral settlement, the Indira Colony has not been lifted or evicted. And then on the other side of the municipal border, there is Bhaisa Tibba, which lies in Panchkula. And the purpose of studying these two settlements together was to understand they're both informal settlements, but there's a huge difference in terms of amenities. So while Indira Colony receives Swachh Bharat toilets and pipe water supplies, Bhaisa Tibba is another scenario where it's not recognized by the government and it has not been given the essential amenities. So it was good to contrast the two settlements. And then towards the south, you can see between Panchkula and Chandigarh is the city of Zirakpur, the new satellite city that has come up. So this is one city that I zoomed into, and I try to understand what is going on in Zirakpur in terms of the peri-urban developments that are happening here. Then again, there's Jagatpura, which is an urban village. It is full of migrants from all over the country, actually. And again, there's the dismal state of the amenities is something that strikes. The landscape completely changes from you leave sector 48 of Chandigarh and enter Jagatpura, the stench, it hits you, and the kind of lack of amenities also stares you on your face. Then in Mohali, I had chosen the village of Sohana, which was earlier a village, and it appeared as a census town in the 2011 census. And now it has come under the fold of the Mohali Municipal Corporation. So it is now a statutory town. And I tried to understand what was happening in Sohana. So the agricultural land in Sohana was actually acquired for developing the sector number 69 and 70 of Mohali. And people, the Jats who were owning the land got sudden profits, and the whole community disintegrated. So some of the Jats decided to move to other districts to procure land and make their businesses happen there. People who stayed back in Sohana extended their houses and utilized it for rental purposes. So again, another kind of real estate developments based on rent-seeking behavior, that kind of developments happened here. So before I go on to describe what is happening in Zirakpur, I wanted to understand that what was happening in other parts of the country in terms of peri-urban developments in around other cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Delhi. And so what I did understand, there were different strands from the literature that came out. That peri-urban is a diverse zone. It is a home to migrants, as Rumi sir also said. It is a zone where land is up for grabs. The developments are real estate led. So Goldman's thesis about speculative urbanism, where the IT companies are busy buying land in the peri-urban spaces, and everybody has now become a broker in that area, trying to strike a land deal. So there's a lot of speculative urbanism. There's residential segregation. There are shifting governance institutions. So, for example, Ashima Sood points out that there is multiplicity and obscurity in terms of governance. So there are multiple governance bodies there present in the peri-urban spaces. The villages have the panchayats, the towns have the municipalities. So, and there are industrial SEZs. So there is an obscurity and a multiplicity, which actually aids the real estate sector to come on and do their thing, to build. And there is a growing number of census towns in these peripheries. The subaltern kind of school of thinking in Center for Policy Research in Delhi has done significant work in this aspect. And it is a zone of the rural. It is a zone of rapid urbanization and frontier urbanism, as Guru Rani and Das Gupta highlight. So I'm going to unpack some of these concepts. So beginning with Goldman's thesis of speculative urbanism, and Ashima Sood's also written about what is happening in the periphery of Hyderabad and in the case of Noida and Delhi. So what Goldman has actually said is that living in a world-class city like Bangalore today has become a highly speculative and dangerous proposition. So why does Goldman say this? He says that a lot of speculation is happening around land in the periphery and through the everyday practices of the world city making. So governments are obsessed with making the cities world class, and Bangalore, which is also referred to as Silicon Valley of India, through the everyday practices of world city making, government actors deeply entangled with real estate brokers, dealers, and political party leaders are actively auctioning public lands and goods, as well as using the muscle, the good of the nation style development to push small land users aside in the rush to capitalize on global forms of land speculation. So this is the case of Bangalore. And Ratula Kundu, in her study of Rajarhat New Township in the peri-urban Kolkata, also points out to similar process happening in the periphery of Kolkata, where she says it's a clear case of speculative urbanism. There's invisibilization and dispossession of some groups. And there's a high-rise apartment kind of development which lacks supportive facilities. And she also points out that due to the 2008 crash, there are unoccupied apartments because there was a lack of new buyers. And there was a clear splintering in the houses in terms of the skilled migrants who worked in the IT jobs in high-rise, lived in high-rise apartments, while the low-skilled, lower-income ones live in the old village part of the settlement. Then there was resistance to land grabs by the local community, and the fragmentation of the community was there. Then Gram Panchayats also facilitated the private developers. They aided the process. Then she finally says that people were acting as infrastructure in Rajarhat, where erstwhile farmers were providing the missing facilities such as auto rickshaw for transportation. They were supplying milk, drinking water, and so on and so forth. So I found both the case of Bangalore and Kolkata very relevant to what is also happening in Zirakpur, as I will briefly show. Coming to Guru Rani and Dasgupta's thesis of frontier urbanism, they say that the frontier is a volatile and active landscape caught in a vortex of change. It is a place full of potential, but also perils, simultaneously inside and outside of the regimes of capitalist accumulation. And these frontiers are actually made up of dispossessed peasants, displaced migrants, and poor tenants who battle for space with new middle and upper class housing enclaves, shopping malls, office towers, and infrastructure corridors. They must share these frontiers with flexible state functionaries, local intermediaries and landlords, rent extractors and land speculators, petty entrepreneurs, and real estate agents. So based on her observations in Gurgaon, Guru Rani highlights that the urban question is essentially an agrarian question. And caste is very important in the peri-urban spaces. In a similar vein, Carol Upadhyay in her paper argues that how Dalits are resisting land grabs. So Dalits have to often sell their land at lower prices because they do not have clear titles. So how the Dalits are resisting this kind of acts, and so they bring the aspect of occupancy urbanism, how the urban poor lay claims to the land. And so Gurgaon also characterized by a water shortage and dilapidated housing within the original village boundaries, also called the Firni boundaries. It's a clear case of splintering urbanism. It's an urbanism that can explain how changing relations of caste and land produce an uneven geography of spatial value, and how the everyday practices of compensation, capture, and rent play out. An urbanism that does not erase or assimilate the rural, but an urbanism in which agrarian and urban dynamics sustain and produce each other. It is called agrarian urbanism. So coming to the case of Greater Hyderabad, Ashima Sood points out that there is a conversation between the speculative and the occupancy urbanism, and she identifies three strands of thinking that have emerged in the peri-urban literature. She talks about the real estate turn and the political economy of the unrecognized or the denied urbanization, and then she finally talks about occupancy urbanism. In the case of Noida, Sood highlights how she points out an incident where a domestic worker goes to claim her salaries and is locked up, beaten by her employers in the high rise. And then therefore she says that Noida is a home to enclaves created by spatially targeted infrastructure development and maintained in some ways by the instrumentalization of urban governance modalities. The speculative frontier emerges as a deeply divided territory, one that actively subverts the possibility of occupancy. So she's pointing out to the class struggles in these peri-urban spaces, what is tolerated and what is not tolerated, and how much of the possibility of occupancy urbanism exists. In the case of Hyderabad, she points out to the laxity in the governance in these spaces. She says the primacy of real estate interests on Greater Hyderabad's speculative frontier is tied to jurisdictional multiplication and institutional voids which mark its territory. Who is in charge is a question to which the answer remains obscure, allowing state actors considerable power without accountability. So when there is obscurity, there's also anarchy in a way. So finally, she says that governance arrangements emerging and dissolving in the speculative frontier bear some imprint of real estate agendas. She talks about industrial area authorities, municipalities, panchayats, and finally there are outgrowths, urban outgrowths, a category in census where there is no clear governance system in place. And this actually facilitates the entry of the real estate sector and also promotes occupancy urbanism. Now coming back to Chandigarh, this is a map from the regional plan prepared by GMADA, the Greater Mohali Development Authority. And as you can see in the periphery of Chandigarh, there are several new towns, which are the cities which are growing at much faster pace than Chandigarh itself. There's Mullapur, Kharar, SAS Nagar, also known as Mohali. There's Banur, there's Dera Basi and Zirakpur. Now the advantages that the peripheral cities, actually this was according to the Le Corbusier plan, these areas were supposed to be conserved as the green belt. But what has actually happened is quite the opposite. They have urbanized very, very rapidly, and the advantage that they enjoy is the low operational costs of businesses. So increasingly in Zirakpur, some business people told me that they wanted to move out of Chandigarh and come to Zirakpur for several reasons. One is that they cut their operational costs by 50% due to the lower rentals that Zirakpur offered. Then Zirakpur is an important transit node. It is well connected to the railway station, Chandigarh railway station, to the international airport. And it has an interstate bus terminal which connects Zirakpur to other cities in the north of India. So let me just introduce Zirakpur. In the year 2001, Zirakpur was a village, and a group of villages kind of together formed this node which had 20,000 population, and the municipal council was established somewhere in the early 2000s. The current population is around 3 lakhs, as the municipal councillor has informed me. And as I said, that Zirakpur enjoys the strategic location. It's the highway to the Shimla, Delhi, Patiala and Ambala pass from Zirakpur, and it has low rentals. So there is businesses are moving here, and there's a huge wedding industry with all the banquet halls, and almost many of the weddings of Chandigarh happen in Zirakpur. There are malls and factory outlets. The businesses have moved here. The discotheques are also more happening here because, in Chandigarh, the restrictions of the timing are there, like the discos close at 11 p.m. And in Zirakpur, they continue to operate till 4 a.m. So a lot of youth in Chandigarh actually now goes to shop and hang out in Zirakpur. So the municipal council also introduces Zirakpur as a satellite town of Chandigarh. And they say that on the basis of the key 5 parameters like real estate, people, physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, and business environment, the hottest emerging city is Chandigarh. India's hottest emerging city is Chandigarh. And this, the council page ascribes this to the business opportunity that the periphery is actually providing. So they say Chandigarh scores because of the rapid development taking place on its outskirts in areas like Panchkula, Mohali, Zirakpur, and Dera Basi on the Chandigarh-Ambala highway. Good connectivity, low operational costs, and high disposable income also contribute to it be declared as India's hottest city. So this is the master plan 2031 of Zirakpur. As you can see, it is very densely packed residential development with the commercial ribbon kind of growth happening along the highways. And the one thing that strikes when you visit Zirakpur is the lack of open spaces. So there are not as many parks and playgrounds here. So coming now to the splintered nature of Zirakpur. So Zirakpur pretty much is what Zirakpur is to Chandigarh, as what Gurgaon is to Delhi. You know, it's the same splintered and patchy kind of development happening, and which is led by the real estate. And government has clearly taken a backseat in development of this new city. It's all driven by private players. And so as I said, that the city started developing and the master plan came later. So the infrastructure of the city could not match up to the rising pressure of population. And there's already flooding and traffic issues. However, there's only 40% occupancy of the total housing stock that has been created in Zirakpur. So when I interviewed the chief town planner of Greater Mohali Development Authority in August 2019, he said, so far the housing in Zirakpur is 40% occupied. We shudder to think what will happen if the city's apartments are 100% full. The city's infrastructure does not match its residential growth. The sewage pipes are old and they are also narrow, and they do not cover the entire city. The roads are unable to bear the burgeoning number of vehicles. It is going to be a nightmare if all of the housing stock gets occupied. So this is the interview with the chief town planner. Then currently there are around 60 to 70 private developers who operate here. And, you know, in a discussion with one of my respondents, in fact, several respondents said this, that the local MLA who owned large parcels of land in the city and had developed several substandard housing societies with a lot of leakage issues. And he had made huge profits out of this. And also other people mentioned that many of the builders were themselves municipal councillors. So the state builder nexus came out quite clearly, and it was easy to obtain fake clearance and completion certificates from the municipal council. So for example, one of the affordable housing scheme apartment that I visited, the Astha apartments, they were very angry. The residents were very angry, and they said that the builder had obtained a false completion certificate and handed to them an incomplete project. And because of that, they were facing a lot of problems, and they had actually filed a court case against the builder, and the builder was then supposed to complete the incomplete work. And so there has been a mushrooming of substandard group housing societies, which has also led to several litigations with regard to housing in Zirakpur. And it also resonates with Ananya Roy's thesis why India cannot plan its cities, because there is informality from above. So if the councillors themselves are into building, then one can see what kind of partnership goes on there. So the environmental impacts being borne by the surrounding villages are very high. So in 2019, there was an outbreak of diarrhea in Babat village of Zirakpur because the sewage pipe kind of leaked into the drinking water pipe, and a lot of people got diarrhea. And on the right, you can see River Ghaggar that flows through Zirakpur. And the solid waste that had been dumped beside this river, it makes the site is quite bad. Like there's a lot of stench, and the river has been reduced to a nala. So also another aspect is the deepening housing inequalities. There's an uneven process of land acquisition, and rural low-cost apartments and luxury housing landscapes stand in simultaneously in contrast to each other. And deep inequalities are there in the access to infrastructures like drinking water. And so, for example, these luxury housing estates have their own water supply systems and STPs and so on and so forth. And And Zirakpur is characterized by a leaky built environment because most of the housing projects that I visited, reported seepage issues. So there's also luxury apartments coming up, which will lead to further deepening of these housing inequalities. This is one of the projects coming up by Veera Gold Builders. It is a luxury housing project, and they are using a very sophisticated technology called the Mivan construction technology, which uses cement instead of bricks. And so the buildings are completely made of cement, and the builder promises that there are not going to be any leakage or seepage or issues in the building. So once completed, this complex will have swimming pool, gyms, 24/7 staff to maintain the complex, walkways, and it will kind of represent an island of luxury within like that leaky built environment of Zirakpur. So this is how the landscape looks like. You can see in the front these images of the original village inhabitants, and in the background there is all this high-rise kind of development. So in a paper in EPW, I have argued based on Sanjay Srivastava's conceptualization of capital creates as consumer citizens. In the case of Gurgaon, Sanjay Srivastava has argued that capital has created consumer citizens, modern citizens. But whatever I observed in Zirakpur, I argue that the capital has actually produced a litigant citizen in Zirakpur, because so many RWAs are engaged in court battles. Some of the builders are actually in jail. Others are others are paying penalties. So this paper you can read, it's open access. Then also there's this high crime rate. There are cases of daylight gunpoint robbery and carjacking and loot. And also in terms of gender, Zirakpur is not perceived as a very safe space. So one of my respondents said that she and her husband were going for a drive around midnight, and a girl came running and she tapped on the window, and they rolled down the window, and she said that she's running from the disco, and there was a gang of men following her, and she wanted to be dropped to her residence. So those kind of things are now also becoming very common. So if there's if I have talked enough, then I can stop. Otherwise, I can talk about a little bit more about the two other settlements, Sohana and Indra Colony. I mean, whatever works. I'm okay to stop now.
Yeah, I think it is a little more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you would like to conclude, if that's convenient for you.
So actually, I don't want to conclude, because I want to leave it at that. But these are some of my recent papers, and there are more discussions about these issues in the papers. If somebody wants to check, they're all openly accessible. So I just want to end here.
Okay, that was a very good presentation. Congratulations. And it contained many lessons for us, especially about the changes that are occurring near Chandigarh, and the kind of problems it is creating for the people who have been living there for ages, and also for the new migrants. And the intermixing that is occurring is also something to address an issue. That's something for the governments to address. There are many, as you said rightly in your presentation, about the natives taking up their own initiatives to report to the government agencies about the problems that are occurring. And I think the start has to come from the side of the government departments, who should monitor the changes that are occurring, and also take necessary steps to address the issues. So for me, and for I'm sure for others, it was a very enriching and good presentation, especially your points about splintered development, flooding, traffic, less infrastructure, the state builder nexus, substandard housing. And you are right in saying that some of these characteristics are quite commonly observed across Indian cities where such transformation is occurring. You went ahead in your research in terms of understanding the problems that the local government or the municipal council there is facing. I think for me, that's an area of an equal interest, I would say, because if that agency is responsible for the governance of Zirakpur, then it becomes necessary to understand what kind of challenges are they experiencing. I'm sure they are there, they exist, they are doing their work. It is a very, you would agree, it's not a very easy situation for all. It's quite complicated because many a times the problem also occurs from the side of the citizens. The full blame cannot be given entirely to the government because there are violations of various kinds. You know, you mentioned about occupancy certificates and completion certificates. Once in the plotted housing, especially, I have observed that once occupation or completion certificates are taken, citizens make major changes in the building plan, which is against the building bylaws. So it's a complicated situation. The government departments have to overcome these barriers and challenges to create better conditions, livable conditions, ensure equity, safety, better mobility, etc. To take this discussion forward, I would like to invite our very well-known panelists in today's program. If Mr. Samir Onhale, Joint Commissioner, Directorate of Municipal Administration in the Maharashtra government, if you have joined, may I invite you to give your comments on the topic chosen for today's discussion?
Sir, he's not here. I will try to connect. Maybe he's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will request Dr. Bhavna Bali to share her views and observations, and if she has been engaged in similar work, you might like to highlight some of your own experiences. And if you have more knowledge and information about the kind of conditions that are observed in Chandigarh, please feel free, and you are welcome to share these with all of us. Dr. Bali.
Please unmute, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ejaz, for your kind remarks. Good evening, everyone. Before I begin my observations on this theme of today's discussion, I would like to thank IMPRI for giving this opportunity to join the City Conversation series. I'm delighted to hear the views of Dr. Kanchan Gandhi on her research on the peri-urban areas of Chandigarh. This is a city which also happens to be my native city. So I'm very happy to hear your views about your research on Chandigarh's peri-urban areas. I agree with you, Dr. Gandhi, on the points that you have made as part of your research. And here I would like to go a step ahead and put forward a couple of points for consideration insofar as the understanding of the spatial context of peri-urban areas is concerned. That's the first point. The second point is around the question of urban governance. And the third point, which is related with urban governance, but in the context of access to resources, particularly the common property resources. And I would like to point these out in terms of my own experience of working in areas. So we all agree that, and we also understand that peri-urban is a spatial construct, which is highly dynamic and forever in a state of flux. Its physical, socio-cultural, and functional characteristics are inherent, but are mostly acquired in response to the processes of urbanization and the demands which are generated in the city. So therefore, the city and the periphery and what constitutes a peri-urban cannot be separated. And in that context, all peri-urban areas owe their identity to the city, but an identity which is constantly changing. And when I say this, I mean that there is nothing which is a permanent peri-urban, because today's peri-urban will eventually be tomorrow's core city for its own periphery. And therefore, the peri-urban as a spatial entity is a city in the making. So this is something that we have to be very, very, we have to really understand this. So we cannot segregate the city and the peri-urban. And in this context, the interventions that are available for the peri-urban must necessarily then be embedded through the planned urban development that we have for the parent city in terms of the master plan approach that is widely adopted in our country for carrying out all planned urban development. And the irony is that not all urban settlements, we have nearly 8,000 urban settlements, of which 4,000 plus are statutory towns. Not all those statutory towns have master plans. And therefore, in the absence of master plans available for planned urban development, this question of haphazard, unplanned urban development in the city's periphery is going to exist. We cannot do anything about it, but until we come up with measures. And to that extent, the URDPFI guidelines of 2015 require the inclusion of the peri-urban areas, which are the urban spills located in about a radius of 5 to 8 kilometers around the city, with a population exceeding 3 lakhs, to be a part and parcel of the planned urban intervention. Now that's the first point. The second point, which is intricately linked with this, is a question of urban governance. And this point emanates from your own observations on splintered urbanization. It's essentially a juxtaposition of a variety of settlements, both rural and urban, typically rural and atypically rural and urban. And when I say this typically and atypically, I mean completely rural settlements as defined by the government authorities, transitioning large rural settlements which are identified to be urban, having urban character by the Census of India, and which you stated as the census towns. Unfortunately, for these settlements, they do not enjoy an urban municipal status, and therefore are administered they continue to be administered by the panchayats, although they exhibit and they are considered to be urban. And the third, which is transitioning urban settlements, which are which enjoy a complete statutory status is the Nagar Panchayats. Now, these Nagar Panchayats are municipal entities right at the lowest order of urban administration. And they are the ones which in times to come will be full-grown municipal councils, committees, or corporations. The situation here is that for the lower end of these municipalities, they do not have the wherewithal for undertaking planned urban development, and which is why we see this kind of a disconnect or a discordant landscape emerging all around the cities. The third important aspect, which is related, is the question of the access to resources. Now, when you look at the relationship between the city and the rural hinterland or the peri-urban areas, city emerges as exploitative, because the resources for which the city is actually looking at, land, water, forest, none of it is in sufficient abundance or actually is lacking in the city proper. And for its own purposes, it looks to the peri-urban, and this relationship is exploitative. Okay, but how do we come over this kind of an exploitative situation? We can only overcome this situation is by empowering the peri-urban residents through participatory approaches to planned urban development. I'll just briefly give an example of research in the peri-urban area of Gurugram and Noida. Now, residents of Delhi would know that there is a Bandwari landfill site very close. It is along the Gurgaon-Faridabad highway, and it serves, this landfill serves as the joint landfill for both Gurugram and Faridabad. Now, the land for this landfill was acquired from Bandwari village on the grounds that a waste to energy plant will come up at the landfill site. But sadly, that plant never became functional. And to the extent that the peri-urban residents, these village Bandwari residents, have to suffer a lot of the consequences of leachate in the vicinity of their agricultural land because of the landfill. The second question, so who is responsible for the mess? That's a question mark. Development is necessary, but who's paying the price? The second is where the context of the citizens' participation is necessary is once these villages are within the fold of an expanding city and the municipal limits, they cease to exist as independent rural entities. And again, in the case of Bandwari, land was acquired by the municipal corporation, and which was a part of the village common land. However, the compensation was not given to the panchayat, the erstwhile panchayat. The compensation for the acquired land actually went to the municipal corporation, and then there was this kind of a conflict between the erstwhile panchayat members and the municipal corporation as to who should get the ownership, who should get the compensation and for what activities. So I think I'll stop my observations here. I am almost near the end of the time that is allocated to me. But these are the three main points that I put forth before all of you for your consideration, Dr. Gandhi. If at all you happen to look at these questions also, it would be really nice. But overall, your presentation was excellent.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your comments. Like, these are very, very important questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavna Bali. Very, very good points. The points that you highlighted about the the problems that are being faced are extremely relevant and valid. I liked and we welcome your point about, especially the one on which the first point you said that peri-urban areas are like a city in the making. So this makes it very important for those who are responsible for planning and the governance of the area to make use of this opportunity to guide the development in the best possible manner. So thank you very much for your comments, and we would hear more from you towards as we move forward in this discussion. Our second panelist I would like to invite now is Dr. Ashima Sood. Dr. Ashima Sood is Associate Professor at the Anand National University in Ahmedabad. Dr. Sood, if you are connected, I welcome you to give your remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aijaz. And thank you, Dr. Gandhi. I think it was a really enjoyable, very insightful presentation. So, really glad to be here and part of this conversation. And of course, as always, I'm grateful to the folks at IMPRI for inviting me and, allowing me to be part, giving me the opportunity to participate and contribute to these conversations. Dr. Gandhi, this was really very interesting and I think a much needed case study, because there are particularities of the Chandigarh case and the Chandigarh sort of peri-urban growth that have really been missed. As you correctly said, this is really a gap in our understanding, because the case of Punjab is very unique. And for various reasons, I think it's also a case that has not got the attention that it deserves. Most recently, as I'm sure you're aware, we had a special issue in the Janal Samaj called Engaging the Urban from the Periphery. And as part of that, Dr. Ankita Rathi had a rather interesting paper on the case of Patra in the outskirts of Patiala in Punjab, and really taking an agrarian urbanization perspective. In the context of your work in Zirakpur, I think there are so many rich observations and insights that you brought to the fore. So, allow me to perhaps make one or two comments and then also perhaps ask a couple of questions that I'm actually very eager and curious to know about. So the first observation that I wanted to speak to you about was, I think you are citing here Dr. Shubhra Gururani's work, and you talk about the whole nature of splintering, and you also sort of return to the idea of splintered urbanisms. And my question was that, the whole framework of splintering urbanism, as it was posited by Graham and Marvin, emerged in a very particular historical technological juncture, which was really the post-Fordist economy of the global north, where there was an assumption of universal provision of infrastructure. And it was really at the moment when it became possible to unbundle infrastructure and public service delivery that you have the concept of splintering. And I think that we in India are using that concept quite widely. It is a concept, it's a theorization that has a lot of resonance, but at the same time, I wonder to what extent it applies to our context where there is no prior of universal provision of public services. There's always been the splintering in India is it's sort of the norm. It's not really a historical transformation. It has been always the norm. So that was one sort of comment, if you like, and that perhaps I would love to hear your thoughts on. I was also curious to know, I think what was particularly interesting to me was, what you're describing about the state, the sort of social turmoil that is revealed in, the forms of crime against women. And of course, a lot of that also has to do, at least in my view, with, sort of the rush of this real estate money that is transforming, social relations that were primarily agrarian and rural into something which is, urbanizing very, very fast. And I was wondering if perhaps, the Zirakpur case may also contribute to this emerging literature on agrarian urbanism. And you probably, you've already referred to the work of Professor Shubhra Gururani. I think they have a recent special issue in the journal Urbanization, she and Sai Balakrishnan. And I really think that, some of what you're describing of the Zirakpur case would add a very interesting new twist to our understanding of this kind of interface between the agrarian and the urban. So that's my second comment, if you like. Now, a couple of questions that I'm very eager to hear about. One is that, this is very fascinating, and you can probably refer me to some of the literature, but how is it that the regime of exclusion is maintained in, the case of Chandigarh? And Chandigarh presumably has a municipal corporation, because if we think about existing theorizations, which I have, of course, engaged, but really coming from people like Solly Benjamin, who argue that, the municipal corporators, the local politicians are really working very closely with, for example, slum dwellers and, poor groups to help them make claims to the city, claim their right to the city. And so my question really was, Dr. Gandhi, that, in Chandigarh, how is this regime of exclusionary urbanization? And this is something that, is not just the case of Chandigarh, it also applies in pretty much all of our metropolitan areas. How is this regime of exclusionary urbanization, sustained? And then what is the role of places like Zirakpur in providing potentially a counterbalance to that? So that was, the first question that I had. And then third, I think really fascinating is this kind of real estate tussle that you're describing, which is where municipal councillors are actually engaged in these kinds of, well, almost real estate scams, right? And would you ascribe that to some of the weakness of the enforcement apparatus? Because presumably, the new Real Estate Regulation Act, the RERA, would take care of some of these kinds of problems that are emerging? Or is there potentially some kinds of local, sort of syndicates that are emerging that are, making it more, making it more likely that these kinds of real estate tussles emerge, that there is, all of this rent seeking and, also pretty much what sounds like very, very questionable, real estate activity. So this was my second question. And, once again, thank you so much for your very, very insightful, very thoughtful description of this quite, I think, much needed and overlooked case.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Ashimasu. That was very good points. And obviously, coming from an experienced person, you have been quoted quite a couple of times by the speaker in her work that she's currently engaged in. I thank you for your contribution to this event. I would like to now invite the final discussant, Mr. Samir Unhale, who is Joint Commissioner, Directorate of Municipal Administration in Government of Maharashtra. If you are connected with us, kindly share your views on the topic chosen for today's discussion.
Very good evening. Thank you very much, Empri, for giving opportunity to interact. It was a very wonderful discussion and presentation by Dr. Kanchan. And also thank you, Dr. Rumi, for allowing me to speak here. So my experiences, or rather my window of looking at this social phenomenon of peri-urbanization is from mostly focused in Western Maharashtra or Western India. And that too from a spectacle or from a specs of administrator. So it was in a way a very enlightening experience to listen to the various alternative perspectives that can exist and do exist for a similar phenomena that we are trying to observe, study, or work with. So starting with that, I think conceptually, I felt that there was always a bit of confusion between transitory urbanization and peri-urbanization in the Indian context, because when the smaller villages turn into a census town, and after census town, they are made into statutory towns. That is what we call as the transitory, urban area, in which the smaller habitats move into a municipal status. First of all, I think it's a bit of outlandish thought, but sometimes I feel we really don't. Do we really require this strict dichotomy of rural and urban? Because it creates to a lot of at conceptual level and even at implementation level, there are many problems that emerge due to this very strict dichotomy of urban and rural. And in fact, even the United Nations, they don't have any urban or rural. They talk of habitats. So instead of having this very strict and very, razor sharp division of rural and urban, just a passing thought that we should really think of having a Ministry of Habitats, which would look after all the habitats, rural or urban, and probably do away with this razor sharp distinctions between rural and urban. As we know, United Nations talks of the index of or the spectrum of rural to urban. So just another thought which I felt could be tried out. Thirdly, I felt that the issues of peri-urban area, when I say peri-urban, I think I call those areas which are closer to bigger municipal or bigger cities. Like, maybe it's all the metro, like maybe Delhi and Calcutta, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Pune, Mumbai. So the areas which is just next to the administrative borders of those bigger areas, and even this phenomena can be seen even in some cases where sub-million cities are there. So probably this, I think the administrative borders of a municipal area and the socio-economic influence of that urban habitat into its surrounding, I think is always a issue which will be there. And we may not able to find a solution in which they will exactly match. So this is going to be a persistent issue in which the urban, the municipal administrative borders of a municipal area or urban area are not going to be, there is always going to be a time lag between the area. In fact, for example, in say Pune, for example, there has been progressively, we see that the area has been expanded, in which what was earlier a peri-urban area comes into the municipal borders of the bigger municipal corporation. I think similar example is also been seen in Hyderabad. I think Hyderabad almost has around 1,200,000 square kilometers is the area of the larger, the greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. I think it would be one of the biggest municipal corporations in India. So this phenomena in which the adjoining area of the larger municipal corporation slowly gets the urban characteristic, but for some administrative lag, is not in the municipal corporation, is an issue which I think is persistent with us. So, and third, of course, is the issue of planning and governance and provision of the urban facilities to the peri-urban area. So I think if I'm not mistaken, it was the fourth five-year plan, I think in 1968-69, in which the concept of metropolitan regions and the metropolitan planning regions were first brought in. And in fact, that was the time from when we started the planning areas extending beyond the municipal limits. In fact, we had the Delhi Development Authority or the MMRDA or the, I think even the Calcutta Metropolitan Development Authority. So all this, as far as the land use planning is concerned, the greater, the metropolitan and regional planning authorities started coming up way back, I think from the 1970s itself, in which the urban areas, the peri-urban areas were given the benefit of the land use planning. And as was mentioned that the master plans which were brought in. But of course, there is always a time lag between these two things. And therefore, we do find that the plan that is made, approved, implemented, by that time, a lot of illegal constructions do come up into that particular, these peri-urban areas. As far as providing the urban services is concerned, I think, in fact, in MMRDA region, for that matter, a lot of water supply schemes, in fact, are being shared between the municipal corporation and the peri-urban area. In fact, in MMRDA, with the MCGM, the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, also supplies water to the adjoining areas, the smaller councils, and the even villages, for that matter. Even there's a unique experiment in Thane, in which the Thane, Bhiwandi, and Mira Bhayandar have a combined company of water supply, in which the water supply is provided to all these three cities, as well as the adjoining peri-urban area in this in this region also. So we are seeing this in a couple of approaches, in which the responsibility of providing this services like water supply is given to is done by the larger corporations, or the combined or a company combined of all these bigger, larger corporations. As far as the solid waste management issue was raised, I think it was also by Dr. Kanchan and also by Madam, both Bali Madam and Ansood Madam, that this issue has always created acrimony and disputes between the peri-urban area and the municipal corporation as the solid waste management project sites are concerned. Mostly the open landfill sites have always created this dispute. And now probably under the new Swachh Bharat 2.0, which is coming, I believe greater emphasis has been given to processing and decentralized processing, whereby the need of such land, large requirement of land, would ideally go down, and we might be seeing more decentralized waste processing, and even if possible micro waste processing done in the societies as well. And I think that from the administration side, I think one innovation that could be tried is having more collaborative structures between the peri-urban areas and the urban bodies to resolve issues and of common provision of civic infrastructure, as well as cooperation and coordination. In fact, this provision exists in the Act, in which any local bodies can come together and cooperate to resolve their common issues. As far as I think this approach is a bit cumbersome because of the electoral politics and differential burden that is put on the various components of this such a structure. But I think this is a good experiment which can be tried, which can remove the exploitative narrative between the cities and the urban, poor, rural areas, which seems to dominate a lot of intellectual thoughts which goes on. And I think the opportunity of finding a solution and bringing in a resolution of issues, I think may be lost in the urban versus rural exploitative framework that tends to come up many a times. So I think we would be requiring greater innovation, greater collaboration, and trying out something out of box really to find the solutions, because the challenges are increasing exponentially. We saw that how exponential rise of COVID can really create a havoc with what the infrastructure that you have. So I think the solution would lie in trying new innovations, trying new collaborative structures, and maybe a bit outlandish, but we could really think of habitats as a basic unit instead of putting it as urban and rural. For the basic civic structures may not be very different. It might be different in magnitudes. And maybe this, I think at this point, that more innovation, more collaboration to solve the peri-urban issues could be tried. And maybe as far as I just mentioned, that the issue of I think resource allocation is a valid point, and the resource allocation to the Gram Panchayats or to the Gram Sabhas of peri-urban area is something which needs to be considered, and probably a special channel for giving grants to this peri-urban area should be could be tried. So thank you, Dr. Rumi and Dr. Kanchan, for this opportunity of sharing some stray thoughts of a practitioner. I'm not, I don't have any academic background here, but I thought I might share what comes to my mind. So thank you. Thank you, Kanchan. Thank you, Rumi.
Thank you, Mr. Ronale. I think you may not be an academic, but you have a very good practical knowledge and understanding of this topic and the issue, because I believe that you would be looking at this on a day-to-day basis And your points are, I think they are quite remarkable and wonderful. The point about how a larger municipality should assume the responsibility of looking after smaller areas in the periphery, it's an excellent point. And it tells us about the good work that you are engaged in. And your second point about the need to explore with innovations and collaborations is everything that good governance has to do with. And by this I mean that this is how I believe that things can be taken forward. You cannot leave the situation as it exists, and innovation and collaboration are extremely necessary approaches that need to be tried. In fact, through this point, one point that emerges or occurs to me is about the kind of innovations and collaborations that Dr. Kanchan Gandhi might have come across. I'm sure there are certain initiatives that are underway, given the dynamics and all the kinds of problems that exist in the area chosen for study, but there is always something that is taking shape and that can be built upon to improve the conditions, is something for people like us, researchers, academicians, to watch out for. So thank you, Mr. Unhale. We appreciate and give high regards to the points that you have raised in today's discussion. It's always a pleasure to hear your views. We move forward in our program now, and I would like to ask Dr. Arjun Kumar if there are any questions from the participants in today's program, or we move forward in the program.
So we can go to Kanchan, ma'am.
Okay.
To respond, yeah.
So Dr. Kanchan Gandhi, after listening to so many views, I'm sure you might find scope for taking your work forward. The points that were highlighted by the three eminent panelists, are they helpful for you? What do you think of those points?
Yes, very, very helpful. And I'm very grateful to all the three for bringing very diverse perspectives, and, the practitioner and the theoretical perspectives all came in. I would like to respond to some of the things that were said, if you permit me, sir.
Please.
Okay, so basically starting with Dr. Ashima Sood's she asked some very pointed questions. Firstly, she asked why the notion of splintering has been used, and splintering is more of a norm in India rather than an exception. Yes, Ashima, I do agree with that. I mean, when we have these kind of constructs, we like to use them also, and particularly in the Indian context, where everything feels splintered. So I didn't find any harm in kind of adapting the concept to the Indian context, and particularly in the periphery of Chandigarh, which is Chandigarh seen as a utopian city, where people are expected to have access. Everybody like based on socialist principles, and this kind of developments happening right in the periphery also links to the other question that you asked. About how is the regime of exclusionary urbanism is like going on in Chandigarh, and how is it even possible that a city that was planned on socialist principles of equality and everybody having equal opportunities comes to represent a city which is very kind of elitist. And recently the administration of Chandigarh actually organized a workshop where they invited some of us academics to kind of come in and give them recommendations for making Chandigarh a socially inclusive city. So they do realize that there has been a kind of an arrogance among the administrators in the city, if I may say so, that because it was the first planned city and in the modern India, in the post-independent India, and so that clean and green and the city beautiful tagline that was given as a vision it was pretty clear that the controls would be very, very strict, and informal behavior, whether be it the crackdown on street vendors or informal settlements, is very, very, very prominent there. So it is very clear that the first aim of the administration is to maintain the character of that city beautiful, and anything that disturbs that is undesirable in that context. So that is how I would like to respond to that question. And then, Ashima, you asked about the real estate tussle. Yes, RERA, ever since it came in, the municipal councillor told us that after the act was in place, now there is much more accountability. And so the future developments in Zirakpur will happen in a much more controlled fashion. But whatever damage has been done, it was before the RERA. Like all these leaky buildings and the built up that came up was before the RERA. And so now, yes, I agree that as the municipal council, or the EO of the municipal council also told me that now whatever henceforth is happening will happen in the context of RERA, and builders will be held responsible and be penalized. So that anarchy of the previous time will not be continued. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Gandhi, thank you for your response and rebuttal, further enriching the discussion. If there are any questions to Dr. Gandhi or any of the panelists, we can take them. There is still some time for us to conclude the program.
Right, sir, but if I may ask a question, since we're talking about RERA.
Certainly, please.
Yes,
please.
How do you see in your research the role of a Greater Municipal Development Authority, which is from all the mega cities in our country, and what is the role of the bylaws which state governments enacts? Do you see the levers behind that, especially for sustainable habitat in our peri-urban areas? The bylaws as a tool?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get the point. Like the bylaws.
Bylaws, how do you see those are effective? Because we are speaking about RERA and this nexus. Do you see what can be used by the bylaws? Because cities also have those levers, to use or to penalize or to act. Those are the main levers. How do you see those being effectively being used, especially in the greater municipal development areas, be it Chandigarh or be it Hyderabad or be it any mega city in our country?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I sense that Dr. Kumar is probably trying to understand the role of RERA and the role of bylaws, whether any within the area that you have chosen for development, as to how those instruments are they working effectively? Are they able to control some of the problems?
So I didn't look much into this bylaws and the RERA. Like, this was like, these were passing references in my work, that the municipal council only assured that after the coming of the RERA, these discrepancies are going to be, lesser. But I didn't really look into the fact that whether the bylaws were being followed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right. Bhavna ma'am is raising hand, ma'am, if you want to come in.
Yes, if I can, add to that point. You see, in the case of some of these, settlements which have now been absorbed within the municipal limits, the bylaws will not apply. The rural Abadi area, the Abadi area as such, or the Lal Dora area, which is defined by the FIRNI, there the urban building bylaws do not apply, and which is why we see this kind of a discordant landscape of the erstwhile village Abadis being part of the urban, the city, but the city proper follows some kind of building bylaws and regulations, and these have completely different. So there is not going to be a sort of a convergence as far as building bylaws are concerned for this. However, in the case of the planned urban developments elsewhere, there is expected to be a convergence or meeting of the building bylaws, more stricter norms. If you, Dr. Gandhi, you may be aware of the new Chandigarh, which is coming up on the other extremity of Chandigarh in Mullapur. That urban development is by far more regulated as compared to the development that has happened in Zirakpur, and that's primarily got to do with the new Chandigarh being envisioned as an eco-city and a separate master plan having been provided by the Gamada, and the building bylaws which are appropriate for that area. One can see. So there is a kind of a clear distinction. But the newer, developments which are happening in Greater Mohali area beyond, the current, the existing urban, the urbanized limits, I think there is a lot of scope for ensuring that the building bylaws are adhered to. Yes, thank you.
Right. We have one question from Harishankar Kumar. Ma'am, how can we define or bifurcate the boundary between peri-urban and rural urban areas? And also let me add one more question, or if we can also touch upon about the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Urban Mission, something, based upon from Pura, and how we have 1,000 such clusters located. Earlier it was 300. So what do our panelists see going forward, those kind of schemes or habitat issues to touch upon? So Kanchan ma'am, would you like to take this question from Harishankar Kumarji? How can we bifurcate the boundary between peri-urban and rural urban area? Or it's more directed towards peri-urban. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to answer that. Like, how do you draw boundaries? And I mean, we for one, like at ICER, like me and my mentor, we are calling for dismantling of boundaries. Like we feel like the Tri-City should be seen as like, one unit. The problem is that there are boundaries, and that is why many urban issues are coming up. So, for example, like Chandigarh administration wants to strictly work within its boundary. And as Bhavna ma'am said, like, you can't separate the city from its periphery. So what happens if the Chandigarh administration doesn't talk to its peri-urban counterparts of Panchkula and Mohali? Then this whole boundary business is kind of something that we want to do away with. And I have no answer to how can we define or bifurcate the boundary between peri-urban and rural urban area. I don't have a smart answer to that right now. Maybe somebody else can take this question.
Okay, thank you. I think you're right. It's not easy to define the boundaries. If we just think for a minute about defining the boundaries, administrative boundaries already exist. We all know that there is a urban area. Its limits are up to this point, and then there is a adjoining urban area or a rural area. But the kind, I too faced this challenge of while I was writing on this topic, about what is it that people are trying to say in this regard. And I think the kind of growth that occurs in such areas, it doesn't take into account the administrative boundaries. The built structures, the buildings, they just grow, they mushroom, and it creates problems for everybody to understand where one boundary stops and the other begins. So this issue needs to be controlled and addressed. I think It's not impossible to do that, but that's how things stand insofar as India's case is concerned. And I often think that how are other nations in the world, if you had a chance to look, someday, somewhere a beginning has to be made within India to address this issue. It cannot be bypassed forever, because if one talks about sustainable development or inclusion or improvement of the environmental conditions, you cannot ignore these aspects. If you are being compared with global cities, and if your rankings are not faring well, it's a cause of embarrassment and a cause of concern, not only in terms of the rankings, but also in the quality of life that people are leading. You cannot just leave things as they are, whether it's related to chaotic growth and development or the deterioration of the environment. Things have to be put in order, and it would be interesting to look at some of the cases beyond the Indian territory as to how such problems have been overcome by those nations. They are part of this world, and they have been able to address this challenge. So why not India? And why not offer a better quality of life to the inhabitants of this nation? So these things are, I believe, more work is required on such topics. Is there any other question? Let me see the chat box now.
Yes, sir, we have one more.
Okay.
And it is by Smita Singh. How do you see the role of ecosystem services, forest, floral and fauna for sustainable habitat in peri-urban and rural?
Is this for Dr. Kanchan Gandhi?
So it's not directed, but I guess I think you all the panelists also.
Okay, anybody would like to take comment on this point?
From the Zirakpur perspective, I just want to share that, there's a disruption of ecosystem services, like that image of River Ghaggar that I showed. It was supposed to provide a point of recreation and of hydration and of water supply to the city. And now it has become like, the dumping ground for the municipal waste. So definitely peri-urban is seeing a stress on the ecosystem services, and this needs to be kind of mainstreamed in the policy. That's all I want to say.
Okay, and I would also like to add to what Dr. Gandhi said, if that helps the person who has raised the question. I observed it in Chennai about, and this is also happening in other parts of the country, about the depressions or the water bodies that are being filled with in the name of development, for the purpose of development. And in Chennai, people were saying, on the outskirts of Chennai, people were saying, the local population, that this has disturbed the environment. There are birds that are dependent on these water bodies. They come regularly during a certain season of the year, but because of the filling of these water bodies with the concrete and other structures, their habitat is being disturbed. So these are some of the negative consequences of growth that is occurring in cities. I think such matters should be given more importance. There should be greater controls to guide new developments. New developments are necessary, but are we ensuring that they are being done in the best possible manner is something to look into. So yes, this is a very valid point raised by the participant about the implications on the environment and ecosystem. And in many cases, this aspect is being overlooked. Now, I would like to ask Now we are approaching the end of the time of this today's discussion. If there is any discussant would like to give any concluding remark, please feel free to do that.
Yes, or the way forward for the subject.
Way forward has already been pointed out very professionally and perfectly by Mr. Samir Unhale, and also by the other participants, speakers, Dr. Bali, Dr. Sood, Dr. Gandhi. Any addition to what has already been mentioned by the discussants?
Ashima wants to say something.
Yeah, Ashima, ma'am, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you so much, Kanchan, for your comments. I think, very apropos. But I also, wanted to point out that I was really struck by some of what Mr. Unhale was saying, as Dr. Aijaz also said, very on-point remarks. And it's remarkable to me how his practitioner perspective matches so much with what we are finding as academics. I mean, academics for a while now have been talking about planetary urbanization and sort of the gradual disappearance of this boundary, artificial boundary between the urban and the rural. And it was quite remarkable to me that Mr. Unhale made the same point. And in that context, I did also want to say that Dr. Kumar's point was also extremely relevant because, in fact, if we are moving into a world where, the urban is a defining condition, right? And sort of this artificial boundary between the rural and the urban is disappearing. And I'm speaking of this in a conceptual manner, right? I mean, I agree with Dr. Aijaz that, of course, we can draw the boundaries on the maps. And of course, there is a way in which the census understands these categories, but conceptually, these boundaries are disappearing. In that case, it does make sense, really for me, as I see it, the big difference between the rural and the urban is the urban has higher levels of infrastructure provision, and that is because municipal corporations are committed to that agenda in a way that panchayats have not been able to do. And so, I absolutely agree that, the sort of Pura model and the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee urban model, policy model, I think is really the way to go. So I just want to make that connection between what, where we are sort of going into this discussion between what Mr. Unhale said and Dr. Kumar said, and of course, Kanchan, your own very insightful remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Sood, for the addition. Very much appreciated. There is one comment by Prab Bedi about her observation, and it's available in the chat box. She says that it's important to look at history of peri-urbanization around Chandigarh, despite the 8 and later 16 kilometers peripheral boundaries. Initial haphazard growth benefited from the change of land use, and by the time lessons were learned to acquire the surrounding areas for organized development, places like Zirakpur had already mushroomed. Here, political will has played a very crucial role. In future too, it will and needs to be inclusive and participatory. That's a good point. Thank you very much, Dr. Bedi, for participating and highlighting this point. If there are no further comments, I would like to conclude this program by saying that,
So
yes,
Bhavna ma'am has.
there is a, okay.
Bhavna ma'am, please. Please unmute.
Yes, so the point that has been made by Ms. Bedi about Chandigarh's periphery, so there was a legislation, the Periphery Control Act of 1952, which was revised thereafter 8 kilometers and then extended to 16 kilometers. But, the political compulsions will always remain. No matter how much we may try to look at clearing the boundaries, having no boundaries, but the case of Chandigarh is very, very contextual in the context that Chandigarh's city's maximum limit will lie juxtaposed to the limits of the Union territory of Chandigarh. And it cannot, it won't expand. So it's a city which is bound, which is, in a way, its physical extent is defined. And in such a case where the physical extent of a city is defined, there is more control that can be, we can have a better control, better management, etc. As compared to all the other cities which continue to keep growing over and over. So as long as that physical expansion is going to happen incessantly for other urban settlements, I think, we will be dealing with a lot of these issues of resource allocation, resource sharing. Mr. Unhale had talked about this resource sharing between the different municipal corporations and the peri-urban areas. It's great. And it has happened because, there is a company that is involved. But in many of the cases where the basic urban services remain with the parastatals, whereas this function should be actually performed by the municipality, so long as that kind of a disjunction remains, I think it'll be difficult to get the peri-urban and the urban together. So I conclude my remarks here, and it has been a very interesting discussion on a very important theme of urbanization. And thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for throwing light on the context of Chandigarh, and to Dr. Aijaz, to Dr. Sood, very pertinent points made by Dr. Sood, and of course, Mr. Unhale. And thank you, Impri, for the invitation. Thank you.
Rumi sir, since we are discussing in this depth, I thought also to enlighten by you. Ma'am really posed a very important point that even the Zirakpur is now mushroomed. So we will have to go beyond that. And what is happening over a period of time. And ma'am also, Kanchan ma'am also highlighted that only the occupancy, there is 40%, 50% vacant housing also becoming very, even in Noida or Greater Noida, all the places we are seeing. But then, sir, the point, it's also kind of state and market debate. That market is moving forward, and then we see not in 5 years, 10, 15 years, then that is full, or the occupancy comes to 80, 90%, and it becomes elite area. And then there is mushrooming again in the nearby. That area is also expanding. Sir, how do you see this state and market phenomena, or how, in your experience, experiences of any other different country, that how this can be managed well, because it's going like virtuous cycle as we see it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cycle, and it is continuing for an indefinite point of time. I have not noticed such growth and such irregularities in several of the places that I've visited. Somehow they have been able to address this issue, and I think the way forward is for the governments at that level to work closely with the communities. As Mr. Unhale is saying about entering into partnerships or collaboration, involving the non-government organizations, but there has to be greater interaction between the citizens, or a platform has to be created, or scope has to be provided for facilitating greater interaction between the citizens and the government agencies. If the two operate in silos, then the problem remains. And therefore, the best way forward, in my opinion, and as Dr. Gandhi has also mentioned, that the plan exists. We learned that there is a Zirakpur master plan. So planning document is there, but planning document has to be taken forward in the best possible manner. And once that plan is translated into projects and other activities, then it should be convenient and conducive to all the actors that exist. So this aspect seems to be lacking. Either teams have to be formed by the government department in terms of entering into interactions with the citizens to know their concerns. And also, if there is an irregularity by the government department in certain cases, then steps have to be taken to correct those who are involved in that irregularity. The change will come from both sides: better functioning by the government department and better response by the civil society or the communities that are residing in that area. If there are no bylaws or law, there have to be some parameters or guidelines in which things should be given a shape. If those things are missing, then they should be prepared and adopted and implemented. So that's what I think, that better performance by the government department, better response by the civil society and communities, and frequent interactions to know what model works best in a certain location would be, I think, I personally believe that more work is required. This is a gray area. It has been, it's not being done in this manner, and therefore this needs to be done with greater force.
Right. So, Samir sir, would you like to add anything? Then probably Rumi sir can conclude. Or Kanchan ma'am, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Dr. Arjun. I'm thankful for the opportunity provided by IMPRI.
Thank you, ma'am. Samir sir, you want to add anything? Samir sir, you are on mute. Samir sir? We are not able to hear you, sir. Okay, nevertheless, Rumi sir, if you'd like to conclude.
Yeah, I would like to conclude by thanking all of our panelists and the organizers of this program. It has been a great discussion. Many things, in particular about Chandigarh, have been learned, come to our knowledge, and it's a great opportunity to build on some of the ideas that have been discussed. I thank IMPRI for organizing a program on this topic, and I would like to hand the platform to Dr. Arjun Kumar.
Thank you so much, Rumi sir. So on behalf of IMPRI Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, I thank all of you for joining us today in our series, The State of Cities, #City Conversation, and today's a very special talk by the state of on the state of peri-urban by Kanchan Gandhi ma'am. And I would like to thank our speaker and all the participants, the chair for the session, Dr. Rumi Azad sir, and our discussants, Dr. Bhavna Bali ma'am, Samirun sir, and Dr. Asima Sood ma'am, and to all the participants also here on Zoom and on Facebook Live, and those who would be watching later on YouTube and listening to our podcast. Thank you very much. It was a very stimulating discussion, and we hope that you'll also join in our future episodes of City Conversations or #Web Policy Talk. Thank you, and please take care of yourself. Thank you. Very nice discussion, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much, Dr. Jaijat. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Thank you, Dr. Bali.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.